These are just some shots of the different mechanisms that has been made over the years, and here you can see that in surgery or for any other manipulation, you need a three-dimensional space in which, first of all, to find out where your control element or your hand is, and secondly, you also need to know what is the force being applied by your input at the output center. Like, let's suppose you got a robot which is picking up something, or like it's going to grasp something. Now, here what we do is presently we just give the command grasp. So we just don't know what is the force being applied by your gripper onto that particular part that you're trying to lift or things like that. So if it's a very soft thing, you may crush it, and or the thing may slip. Danger or things like that. There is some sensor. It says that start beating. What tells your stomach to start digesting a particular type of food? What tells you, like, so these are all senses, right? And senses basically, like, if you look into the animal kingdom, you'll find some of the senses that we perceive that we don't have. Please understand the word we perceive that we don't have. We do have it. But over the period, it has degenerated into such a, of obsolescence or disuse that we no longer use it for our benefit. Haptics is a way of experiencing the data. Till now, used to give a command. It used to be either be displayed onto your screen, or the output used to come out in the printer or some other robotic device which was there. There was a disconnect. In this particular haptics, what we are trying to do is we are trying to feel what we are doing. Now that feeling can be through any of your senses. We have been able to use only one or two of the senses right now. And the most important part of it is touch. So let me just continue. If you look into these, this particular device here, okay, what is basically happening is you are trying to control what is the position of your hand, your fingers, and at the same time you are trying to find out what is the force that you are applying. Like I'm gripping, okay, what is the force with which my robot end effector there is trying to grip it. So we have got a force sensor there which feedbacks the data into some elements in the finger, which pulls it back and tells you, gives you a feeling of force, right? Sometimes, like in this particular device, here you are moving a joystick in 3 dimension, up, down, and all. So normally a joystick is placed there only on the screen. In this one, basically you can move it up and down also and move it wherever you want. And wherever you're moving, you are getting a feel of what is the force that you're exerting to do that. And it's being used in surgery, you all must be knowing about it. Now, when we talk about haptics, there are different types of haptic control that you're having. It depends on the dimension, whether it's a single point, like your smartphone. Now, in a smartphone, if there's an alert, there's a vibration. So you're basically getting a feedback into your hand about that particular event. But it's happening only at a single point. The vibration is only at that particular point, and it is sort of in one particular way of vibrating depending on where that motor is. Sometimes you've got a multiple degree of freedom where you have to move your hand and you have to feel what you're doing, especially in surgery or for bomb disposal or for any other application where you're controlling the machine in a 3-dimensional space. Again, area whether you are trying to do it inside the machine itself. Again, the same example I would like to take of your smartphone, or you're trying to do it out of the machine, like that particular joystick which I showed you. It's outside where you're trying to control. Now the actions, this is very important. It can be passive. That basically means that it just provides a resistance to what you're doing. Now, if you're pushing, it's going to stop you. You leave it there, it remains there. So we have got controls which passively resist your motion. The degree of that passive resistance is going to depend on what is the feedback that you're getting from there. But you leave it there, it will remain there only. So now the other one is an active one. Whether you push it, it pushes back. And you leave it there, it comes back to you. So there, you are having a motor control to push it backward towards your particular position where you want it to be. Or it will try to go to that particular point where there is least resistance. Interaction is basically how many sensors you are using at the same time. Whether you are using your video, your touch, or some other sensors that you are having, maybe your direction or things like that. How many you combine together to give you that particular experience of the force control that, or not the force, about the control and the feedback that you're getting into you. Then we have got the use. Here, let me again take the case of your smartphone. The vibration is the secondary information that you're getting. It's not the primary information. The primary information would be what you're talking or things like that. But sometimes when it's in your pocket, it just vibrates to tell you that, okay, there is some information that you, if you're free, can go and take it up. Sometimes it's a primary source of information where you're doing a surgery. Whatever is coming into your, the force which is coming into your hand, you're sensing that as the primary information, and based on that particular information, you're trying to do whatever actions or things like that you want it to be done. This is just, advantages of haptics. It is discrete, it gives you information, it gives you a multimodal type of information. The best thing about this is you can work as a human being. Because all your motor controls, all your senses can be integrated together to give you a totality of information. And secondly, one of the other major benefits is you don't clog a particular channel of your information. You will be seeing with your hand, you will be feeling it. Just imagine you're driving a scooter. How many times have you thought when I have to turn my handle? It's just almost natural which comes. Let's suppose you want to simulate flight. Now, the pilot, with his experience and all, he just doesn't have to think about what he's doing. His hands and legs and everything starts moving in that particular one. But you try to do that sitting on a laptop and trying to play the flight control or a racing car type of this one. Somebody who's good on his laptop racing cars may be a very bad driver when he's outside. Because when he's outside, his legs also is giving information. The direction of his body is also giving information. The sight all around, the sound, everything is giving information. And based on that, he's going to do whatever he's trying to do. So, depending on the type of use where we are going to apply the haptics, we have to make the controls, the actuation parts and everything in such a way so that it stimulates and simulates both of them. All-round experience for you. The same thing in different words. You can add realism, engagement, fun multisensory input, improved performance, and these are types of the emotions which you can give back to your body from the digital data that you're having, that you created with your software. Now, how you do that, that is haptics. How you put that data, make a meaning out of it, meaning for maybe the touch to understand, or the eyes to understand, or your whole body to understand. The languages are different. The language in which your eyes understands is a visual, this one, you have to put it as a display. But what your hand will understand is force or direction or things like that. So whichever senses you're going for, you will be basically applying that type of language from the digital data that you've created out of all your calculations and everything. Now, touch is very peculiar in the sense that this is the only sense where you can input data and you can output data. Your eyes can only take in data. But touch, you can give it data, and with the same this one you can feel how much you're putting. So touch has become one of the major part of haptics where we are trying to use it. And please remember that it is multidimensional and it is simultaneous. I mean simultaneous in the sense that you can have multiple touch experiences happening at different parts of your body. The touch feedback that we are having, like if you touch, just touch your fingertip, the feel that something has touched, that is basically on the surface of your finger only. Nearly 40% of the data that you see with your eyes, you can feel with your fingertip. Just by touching something, you can know whether it's cloth or steel or hot or cold or whether it is rough. I mean, so much information comes in. With your eyes closed, you can find out what is the material your shirt is made of. Now, this is a very sensitive part of your body, though we don't take much care of it. The other one is the kinesthetic, where other than this, you're giving information to your muscles here. So when you close your eyes and you raise your hand, you will know how much your hand is raised. So like we have got sensors inside which tells you what is the position of your hand. You can just try it. So what happens is that touch, it may be in one particular place only, over maybe a two-dimensional, like a curved surface or things like that. But the kinesthetic one is in 3 dimension, in all directions you can move. And so the devices to simulate both of them are entirely different. These are some of the different actions that you can have. Like you got tap, you got pressure, you got twist, you got pull, point, shake, rotate, flick, spread and swipe, slide, drag. I mean, these are all the different types of actions by which you can input data or you can take out data. So and most of them, these you will be using in your smartphones, though it's only as an input parameter. You're inputting data by like doing whatever you're doing. But you can get this same thing to give you data back through your hand, through haptics. When we're designing this any particular haptic device, the first thing that comes up is the mechanical design. How you're basically going to design the mechanical parts, how you're going to actuate it with motors and everything, how you're going to control it, how you're going to take the data, and what is going to be the user interface by which you're going to play around with these things. I'll not be talking about the last three. You're experts in that. I'll be just sharing some of the experiences that we got basically in the mechanical part. How to design it in such a way so that you can mimic the motions and you can take out and take in the information that you want from there. Now, any particular information that is coming, it is going to be some electronic signal that you're going to give to your motors or your actuators. The duration is going to tell you something. The envelope is basically how you start and how you fade out. That is going to give you some other information. The magnitude is going to tell you what is the severity of whatever you're trying to input into your this mind. The period is something like, it can be like that, okay, intermittent this one. I mean, the on and the off period, all of them are going to give you some other information depending on your user interface that you're going to develop. The phase is like you've got two different inputs coming. You're basically changing the phase between them, like one starts and after some time the other one starts, or which one is starting earlier or which one is going late. I mean, depending on that also you can simulate different parts of your input. Whenever we are designing a particular haptic device, these are some of the parameters that we have to keep in our mind. The first one is, what is the strength that we are expecting this haptic device to give to us? Whether it is just a shake or you want, like you're trying to simulate a driving car, the forces that are going to be there are going to be much higher. You're trying to control a machinery, or you're trying to drive something. The forces are going to be dependent on what is the strength these actuators are going to give to you. If the strengths are small, you can have very small actuators. If the strengths are higher, you have to go for very high actuation devices. And then you land up with a lot of other secondary issues, just how to manage that particular one. The dynamic performance, how fast it is supposed to actuate, how fast it is supposed to stop, how fast it is supposed to reverse the action. Like let's take a case of just a DC motor. You start it. You cannot stop it suddenly. Because of the inertia, it is going to rotate forward. So what you have to do is, you have to have a mechanism, like if in your haptic device, you want something that it is supposed to just come back, right? Maybe a DC motor or any electric motor is not the choice, because you cannot come back. You have to go forward before the inertia drops down to zero, and then you have to drag back up to reach a higher point where you will be having the same feedback level. So there is a gap. So if your haptic device, what it is trying to simulate, is okay with that thing, then you can go for that. But if it is not, then you have to go for some other solution, right? Then we got the durability. Durability is how long you want it to work. Yesterday there was a talk about space, where you want to work without failure for something around 50 years or 20 years or things like that. Here, like you have to design it in such a way that whatever actuation mechanism you're having, it has to do the work perfectly till a particular period of time where you expect it to do. So your actuation mechanism and the construction has to be in that way. Size and the form factor. You are trying to do something very small, but your haptic device is so huge, it defeats the purpose in itself. So when you're trying to simulate something, let's say surgery, the doctor, he knows medicine. He's God in his medicine part. He's God in his surgery. He doesn't understand the capacitors and transistors and things like that. When he comes and does surgery, he has to have a feel that a patient is in front of me. If he sees all dangling wires or things like that, big motors and things like that, first of all he's going to get afraid and maybe he'll never use it. And he may not be able to learn also. Because when he's doing his surgery, he's seeing with his eyes also the patient. What is the color of the patient? He can get a lot of information out of that. So you will basically try to make a mechanism in such a way that it mimics almost something that you're trying to do. If you've got a car simulator, it has to look something like a car. Okay, you have to have the feel that these things are placed wherever it is supposed to be. Performance, well, you understand it. Cost. You can have the biggest, most exotic technology to do whatever you want. But are you ready to pay the price for that? So, cost is a big factor. So when you come up with the technology to do your actuation and your sensing and everything, you have to limit yourself into that particular mold. Okay, this is how much this is supposed to cost. But let me tell you one thing about cost. There are two types of cost. One is, what is the developmental cost? You electronic guys, you understand what is the cost of development. The cost of replication is very less. So sometimes when you are talking cost, the cost of development, maybe getting a mold for a particular part to be made may be huge, but you take that money out over a period of maybe 1,000 or 10,000 pieces of what you're trying to mold out of that mold, right? So you balance cost in that way. You all know about these drive actuation mechanisms. You've got motors, you've got piezo drives, you've got polymer, any one of you have seen a polymer this in muscle? It's basically just almost looks like a gel. Okay, so you apply electric voltage to it, it either constricts or it will become loose, right? Then we have got different, like in certain very high applications, power applications, they are using even hydraulics and pneumatics. Hydraulics is using oil power, to drive your cylinders. And the same thing in pneumatics, you are basically using compressed air to drive whatever you want. The last two are not that accurate because it's for very precise operations you cannot use it, but you don't have a choice when you are going to use it for something which is very high rate of power to be applied or things like that. Cost wise, they are very cheap comparatively. Another thing which I just wanted to tell you, these are the active devices. Active devices where, like I told you, it can give you a force. So when you are trying to push it, this will push you back and ask you to come back to a particular position, like I was explaining in the first 2-3 slides. Now, these are passive devices. One very good example which I found during my research was they were using shifting weights to simulate this one, power or torque. So when you used to move, then there is to be some weight which is to go up and down. And depending on where the weight is on a rod, just like a lever, the end effector which he was using, that used to have the feel of that something is trying to push it up or down. It was totally mechanical, but it was a beautiful device. I don't have the photograph with me. I would have loved to show you how we played with this, like just imagination. You got electromechanical brakes. So you are trying to push. Depending on the voltage that you're giving it to the brakes, it is going to stop you. But where you stop, it just stops there. Okay. And the same thing with like magnetic particle devices and for this eddy current. Eddy current, just to remind you, is when something is rotating inside a magnetic field, electric current is formed inside, and that electric current tries to stop you, right? So depending on the speed of your rotation, the force which can be generated, you can play around with it. The second last one, this is the electromagnetic fluid devices. These are types of fluids. Basically what happens is you've got magnetic particles which are embedded into a fluid. The density of the fluid changes by the application of voltage or a magnetic field. So let us suppose that a fluid here is to pass through a hole into this particular part here. Now, I don't apply a voltage or a magnetic field, then this fluid is going to be very less viscous. It will just pass through. But if I apply a voltage or a magnetic field, it is going to be very difficult for it to pass through, right? So if I'm pushing this, but just by changing my voltage or my magnetic field, what is going to happen is that the force that I have to apply for it to go to the other end, that is going to change, right? This is again a passive device. you can't push it back unless you've got something which is resisting you from the back. Springs are there, and some research is going on electrochemical devices where you control the chemistry of the fluid with electrical signals. I don't understand it, to be very frank with you. It's an emerging field. Nobody knows what these guys can come up with once this technology comes up. Pardon, sir? Any comments? Yes, sir. So basically what happens is that, see, between a magnetic field, you're trying to rotate something, some disk, basically like aluminum and all. Aluminum is a very good eddy current generator. So what happens is that an electrical field is formed inside that, right? Depending on the rotation speed and the magnetic force and everything, this acts as a resisting force, right? Now, the trick is to ground the eddy current inside. Depending on how you're grounding it, you're controlling what is the force with which it is going to act. See, there is a current is being generated. So let's suppose it's rotating at, say, 5,000 RPM, right? The force is going to be the same. You're controlling how that eddy current is dissipated. If you dissipate more, the force with which it's going to resist is going to be lowered. If you don't resist, it's going to go up. So basically, you're playing with electronics only. So depending on the application, but the forces that are generated by the eddy currents are quite low, first of all. And the device to do it is comparatively, I mean, with the ratio of the force generated, the mass is very high. So I just come across only one or two examples where they try to use it. They were also very specific type of application, basically to showcase that it can be done. I didn't find the actual application in normal life where you can do it. Now, does that, did I answer you? Okay, thank you. This is just a type of graph. This I took from this address which is there. The type of actuation and what are the senses that you can get out of it. So some of the things, you know, like friction, normal indentation, vibration, shear, things like that. There are so many ways in which you can generate that particular sense. What mechanism you use to generate that sense has to be chosen by the earlier this one, like what is the type of force, what is the cost, what is the all the other things is basically going to decide what type of mechanism you are going to use. We've been concentrating on higher torque haptics, basically, like where we are to generate a large amount of force to simulate whatever we are trying to do. The question of large, I mean, it varies. If it is for surgery, like it's few grams, whether it's for a bomb disposal robotic system, the type of forces that we want to generate is quite high. Now, when you're doing this one, these are some of the actual problems that you face when you're designing your particular application. Like you've seen a DC motor, all of you, right? You try to rotate it. There are steps in that, depending on where that magnet is and your coil is, all right? So if you're directly driving whatever your actuator is with a DC motor, there are going to be points where you're going to add more force even if you're not giving any voltage to that. This is called cogging, you all know that. The weight balance, a major issue. Let's suppose you have got 4 or 5 different axes on which the whole thing is supposed to move. You add the perfect system according to your calculation that it has to be this type of actuator. You put it there. But basically what happens is when it interacts with the next axis, gravity will try to force itself because of that particular part that you're adding. Okay. Now, you have to design your whole system in such a way that all the parts, when the final thing comes up, they balance each other out. If they're not balancing, you have to have mechanisms to add counterweights so that the force of that gravity or because of that mass which you are putting somewhere, that is taken care of. Right? If you don't do that, the software guys are going to scream like anything because the whole work is going to shift to them to give it a negative input so that you force it upwards, whatever is the force due to gravity. Okay, so when you're trying to apply a particular force, you find that there's already a force. So what you do is you try to negate it with the drive in the opposite direction, and you might subtract whatever you're trying to do with that plus or minus, then you give the force so that it starts moving. It becomes a big challenge, especially when you're moving in 3 dimensions, because it may be balanced in a particular point. You move it somewhere else, the balance is totally out, right? So the construction of your main device, how you're going to place it, sometimes it's just out of experience that you can just find out, okay, this is the only way I can go about this. Or you can try to do all hits and trials, because whatever the manufacturer tells you that this is this one like specification, the actual part which is going to land at your hand is going to be very different. In software, you can tweak with your codes. Here, you want 1 mm change to be made. Maybe you have to disassemble the whole thing and make a new part. Okay, so I mean, issues of weight balance are huge. Speed of reversal of motion, I just discussed it earlier, that you're moving in one particular direction, you want to move suddenly backward. Or you want to like simulate a crash in an automobile application. So you're standing still, tack, there is a force backward. For the force to be applied, the motor has to generate that, I mean, it has to come into that much motion in itself. That in itself is like a curved, like starting from 0, it's going to go up. So sudden forces that you want, if your application demands it, you have to have mechanisms which can do it. Power to weight ratios, self-explanatory. Like you try to have your mechanisms where you got more power than what weight you're riding. Natural motion replication. As far as we are concerned, I think this is one of the most critical part when you're designing an external haptic device. A doctor is trying to do surgery, right? I'll come to that actually. You'll find that there are very few motions actually which is there, in which he's going to do the endoscopic surgery part. If you follow that path in itself, you're basically simplifying the work of your mechanics, of your drive mechanics, electronic drives, and of your software guys. Because if in any other way you try to do it, you have to use composite kinematic equations to solve what that particular position is going to be. We'll come to that. Inertia, well, size, yes. This I was just talking earlier when we were talking, I mean, so the mass which is there in here, this mass here is the culprit. It does not let you do many things. The first one is the cogging, which I told you about, and the second one is the inertia part. It doesn't let you stop and reverse. So, though it's one of the cheapest methods of putting power into. The second part, which you all have to understand, is that let's suppose I'm using an electric motor. Now, let's take the case of driving a car. Most of the time, my device, my handle is static. I move it here. I want a particular force to oppose it, right? The motor is trying to turn it back, right? So that it moves back. But please remember, at that particular moment of time when the motor's force and my force are balanced, the motor is stalled. The motor is not rotating. The motor is trying to use the total force, but at that particular moment of time, the motor has just stopped. So whatever current you're giving, it is just passing through one coil only. The other coils are not actuated at all. So the rating of a motor depends on when it is rotating at the specified speed. That is when it is dissipating heat due to conduction and air motion and everything, and it is dividing it between the coils. So when you're using it in the haptic part, what basically you encounter is that you cannot use the motor to the specified rating. Let us suppose it can give you a 1 watt output, say a 100 watt output. But in haptics, because you're going to stall it, what is going to happen is you cannot use even 25 watts. If you use something more than that, say 30, 35 is maximum, you will burn the coil. The coil will just burn. So when you are using an electric motor, you have to use 3 times, 4 times bigger motor for the same effect to take place. Just because, you can understand this graph. This is the continuous working range. I mean, this I took from a motor manufacturer's specification. He says this is the continuous working range, right? Now, in the continuous working range, the motor is rotating. Here also, unless you come down to this particular point here, the speed of this motor is not 0. Because in haptic applications, you have to bring the motor to 0. And the moment you bring the motor down to 0, this current that you're having, which is going to flow because of that, you have to reduce it quite a lot, or it will burn. They came up with this coilless coreless motor design, you all must be aware, where you don't have the central armature. You've got the coil made in such a way only so that it's perfectly balanced. Something which looks so this is just the coil. This coil is basically wound in this particular way, and on a plastic rotor it is just put. There is nothing in between. You will be having this magnet here in the center, which is non-rotating. So the magnet is there only, only the coil is rotating on the top. The weight and the inertia of this is quite low. So you do get major benefits out of this. The cogging is very much reduced, though it is still there. Now, I said weight was a big problem. I said when you are using haptics, you are basically working in the 0 speed condition of a motor. So what basically happens is that for a particular force to be applied, you need larger and larger motors. The other way around is that you start amplifying it with gears and things like that. There are problems associated with having gears. You can rotate a motor very easily, but the moment you attach a gear, one rotation on this side may be 200 rotations of the rotor. So the force that is applied here has to be much higher. In haptics, what basically happens is the 0 force that is going to be applied is going to be much higher. You understood what I said? It's very simple. मोटर के साथ मैंने अपने एंड इफेक्टर को अटैच कर दिया, right? Now, if when I move this, there's a gear here. The force that this end effector is going to put on the motor is going to be much higher. So the 0 force that I have to use is going to be very high, right? So I have to be very conservative about how much I can amplify the power of the motor, things like that, and what type of gearing and all is required. Just having a precision gear can increase the cost maybe 500-fold. The cost of the motor is very less compared to the cost of a gear. And the second problem with the gears is the backlash. The number of elements that you're having, they are all going to give you a backlash. So the net effect is going to be a big backlash which is going to be there on your end effector. So there will be some part of the motion where you don't have any this one till the wheels of the gears get cocked up. This was just to tell you about the weight problem. I can have actuators here, I can have actuators here, I can have actuators here doing all the different motions that I want. Now, the actuator here has a weight. This weight has to be compensated here. This total weight has to be compensated here. So, when you are having linkages together, you are basically doing a master compensation program. So the first link which is at the outer end, you are compensating less, and as you are coming inside and inside, you are increasing the compensation force. The actuation force is secondary then, compared to the compensation force that you are using. These are some types of surgery which is going on. These are all endoscopic surgery. So basically you make a hole in your body and you insert a tool, and the tool end are all these types of devices. So this doctor has got the endoscope in his hand. So the other one is here. So what he's doing is, like in this one you can see this is the endoscope which is piercing into the body. At the tip of that endoscope you have got the tools. With the tools you are trying to do whatever, cutting or stitching or whatever. I mean, you can do almost all the surgical procedures that you can do with your hand. This is being done, and these are the types of tools that are being used. These are some very high-end simulators. You can see that like these are parts of the body onto which, like this for knee surgery. You try to do it onto this mannequin. So you've got these haptic devices by which you try to simulate all the forces and everything that comes up. Now, just taking the case of that particular surgeon, the motion of his body, his tool, it has to go in and out, it has to go this much, here and here, it has to twist, right? And there are actuation, things like that. So when you're designing this, your boundary condition where all the things have to be perfect is between this much only, right? And it is all starting at a particular point where the point of insertion is there, right? So all the forces that you are applying is in this insertion point only, right? So you can design, you can innovate different parts so that it passes through that particular point. So your X, your Y, and your Z axis plus the torque, they all pass through one point. This may not be the case in this one. And your whole device has to be balanced for that. And here, the forces that you're using to cut are very small. So the frictional forces or forces due to your weight or things like that, it has to be at least 1/10 of the force that he is going to use, the doctor is going to use. So you have to make your device so perfectly balanced, or whichever way, like this one, or compensated for all the disturbances, so that the actual force that the doctor is going to use is going to be less than that. You can see, like when you're cutting paper, how much force you use. You use very less force. So you have to have much lesser forces that your device is supposed to do. This is one device which we are making for a particular customer of ours. Some parts, some elements have been taken out. Please don't mind. Here, this whole thing can rotate in one particular point. It can move like, I can show you the actual video. This particular lever, this is the point which is inserting up and down. So what is basically happening is we have got something around 5 motor applications here inside, which is compensating at the same time driving all the X, Y, Z, this one and the twist in one small unit. The whole unit is only this much. We had to make it through this printing process, which has become very good nowadays. Otherwise, this device won't have been possible. Very forces that are encountered here are totally balanced. We have got in certain points where we want that compensation to be done. We have got some motors which are actually doing the compensation also. The motion, what you have, what you need. We have exceeded all the specifications required from us by nearly 3 times in this particular device. We are proud of that. These are some haptic devices in our earlier stages of work when it was 2DOF or 3DOF, basically trying to find out exactly how we can control. We are using different technologies. Here, this is this whole device that you're seeing here. This is having 5 degrees of freedom, and the forces that are there, the one hair. I take out one hair, I push it. This whole thing starts moving. It is that delicate, and it has got a resolution of something around nearly 3000 CPR resolution per rotation, counts per rotation in this one, in all the different axes. We have got some axis here and some axis here, and it is perfectly balanced for this particular application. So the motion profile is something around this much, wherein you can move whatever your hand is. This is not for surgery actually, it's for something entirely different. Here, this again to explain, this is both active and passive. You can use it actively or you can use it passively also, because we have got a motor control also, we have got static control also. Because the force in this particular application, what happened was, the force to be exerted was very less, but we wanted a large stopping power. Here, this is supposed to replicate an injection that is given into the vertebra of a human body. The force, like when you're injecting into that particular, there's a very small hole, very small area where you can put the needle. If you put it anywhere, the patient can go into a coma or he can get into paralysis. So the force to be pushed back was very less, but if the needle was hitting a particular bone, it just had to stop. So you apply force, it's not supposed to move. So here what we were having was that the force of back force which was to be applied was quite low. The forward force to stop was very high. This is the device for endoscopic surgery, which you can see the different motions, all the X, Y, Z and everything, where we can put it together too. This is another simulator. Here, this is in a very delicate, this one. You can see the, this is the end effector which the doctor is going to have in his hand. So he's like all the different motions, from top, bottom, things like that. You can see in whichever way he wants, he can move it, and he can have the feel. This whole device gets into a mannequin, so basically the doctor doesn't see anything what is happening inside. We are presently working on some of these systems. This exoskeleton, this terrain realism is basically like for the defense, to simulate a soldier running. The forces, I mean, he'll be basically standing at what point only, but he will be having all the like 3-dimensional forces being applied to his legs and things like that. We are working in surgery, like I was just telling you. For mission control, of course. Here, basically in mission control, we are doing for a bomb disposal robot system, where the force with which you're holding the bomb has to be reflected back into the hand of your operator. Very delicately, it has to be passed through. Assembly education, you all understand, we are using this to try to make it so that you can feel as if you are assembling a particular machine. We are working on it. We have had good success. We are just adding modules to it. Now, this is very important for me. We work with a lot of people who are specialists in their particular application point. We got our good points. You got your good points. We would really like to work on new projects, on whatever that you have come up with. Especially what happens when I started up. I used to have grand ideas. I could do the electronics, I could do the software. But then what basically happened was when I wanted to make the actual thing, I just had to run around on a tool room or things like that and make him basically understand what I'm trying to speak. And at that time I was very bad in Hindi also, so those guys never could understand what I'm saying. What they found is that when we are limited to a particular domain of knowledge, then our ideas are also limited to that only. Here you must have seen, we tried to go out of the electronics and the software part into the mechanical also to increase the boundaries of ours so that we could play with our core knowledge of electronics and software, apply it to a mechanical design so that we get something which is 2 plus 2, 5. Should be more than 5. And by this we also mean to say that we would love to work with your ideas, with whatever your core knowledge is. We would like to add to that so that we can come up with something which is much more than the sum total of what we are today. I thank you for your patience. I tried to explain it. I hope I was convincing enough. Any questions? Yeah, ma'am. Which one, ma'am? That round one? That is for surgery, ma'am. That is for endoscopic surgery. See, basically, it was designed for endoscopic surgery. You can use it according to your imagination. You can use it for according to your imagination. Now, actually, I don't know how much time I have, but like I was telling you about the DC motors and the problems and everything that it has. We have got some devices wherein we have tried to compensate for all those problems so that we get the best out of the both the worlds. This is just one device which I just made in 2 days before coming over because I couldn't bring the whole equipment here. This is a force feedback linear device. You are basically applying the force here. So we have got DC motors here, normal DC, low-cost motors, very high torque with all its problems. In this region, we are trying to take out all the problems with other devices, other combinations of passive devices, and giving it an output here. So this device, basically what happens is, with this motor, I got amplification of 1:100. So whatever force is to come here, I would have needed a motor which was this much. So I'm using this motor with some mechanical parts inside. I'm controlling it both ways, and I'm getting an output. And we are going to use it when the forces are not there, it has got a very smooth motion. And when I jam it, when I use the ask it to force itself down, it can support my weight. That is the force that this can give. And this is happening with just a motor about this size. There's another device, the actual device is being made with a motor which is something around this much size. This is just a normal motor that you get outside. something around 100 rupees, 200 rupees, like those who are working would know. This motor can support my weight with a precision of about something around 0.05 mm of resolution. I can vary, and the other part is this device can give you the shock that I told you about with this motor. So it's basically how you do 2 + 2 = 5, right? Whatever I'm using is all available. So see, in this particular one, these are plastic gears, just to showcase, right? Depending on the application, we use different this one. Like I told you, what is the durability that you want, what is the cost that you are looking at, okay, what are the compromises that you are ready to make, right? Yeah, you can do that. I would prefer to use for moving person, then here basically like you're looking at a resolution about 1 mm, because that is the the movement that you can feel. Okay, so here we can very easily go for a metallic gear. At the same time, like I would like to tell you is what is the precision of the gears that you're looking at. So those things all matter. So this, I forget, 3D printing, sir. Rapid prototyping. Actually the curves inside that was such. It had to be like, I had to make them, I mean, I couldn't, there was, either I could make it in parts, or I would have needed multiple modes of like this one, right? So with 3D printing I could get, because the forces here are very less. I mean, you choose according to your design problem. So here, that was the best option. I mean, we could just get out whatever was in our head. Otherwise, molding or machining that particular part, if at all possible, would have been very costly. It would have added to the cost of this thing. So,
any more questions?
Acoustic haptics, see, basically, it depends on the frequency that you are working on, first of all. Some people are working right in the ultrasound range also, because they have found that much information can be transmitted in that region. In the infrasound, again, a lot of information, basically in the emotion part of what you are trying to do can be transmitted in the infrasound range, right? One good technology which I came across was electrostatic speakers. See, like in a normal speaker system, you have got a baffle which is moving, right? So it transmits, it pushes your airwave to reach you. By the time it reaches you, it just dissipates out, right? Now, in the electrostatic system, basically what you're doing is you're creating a cone of very high frequency, this one, you're ionizing the air inside, and you're trying to move that. So lower power, because you're concentrating on which part of the area that you want. Work is going on. I was fortunate enough to work on one particular aspect of this, really interesting, especially how you can feel. I mean, डर लगने, like the certain sounds, you know, like आपको खड़े-खड़े डर लगने लग जाएगा. You start feeling something wrong is happening, because nothing is moving. कोई आवाज आपको सुनाई नहीं दे रहा, कुछ नहीं दे रहा. It is there. People are working in India also. They are working, and it is going to be something big time. Please don't ask me. You can give me your address. If they feel right, they can contact you. Please don't ask me. I have to be very careful with all the NDAs and everything that I work with because we are working with quite a lot of people. I've given you a very basic idea, not into the specifics.